Now that we have successfully constructed our basic votive house, we're ready to start refining the edges so that we get a nice pristine finish. And then we're going to go ahead and add some of those windows so that the light can shine through. I've allowed this votive house to sit covered in a bag for a couple of days. It's now significantly more dry. It will support itself. We can scrape away at it without it being bent and deformed. But we don't want to let this get too dry. If it starts to turn gray like we're seeing here, that will make cutting open the windows much more challenging and we risk cracking. Our next step is to refine the edges. We really want to create a perfectly pristine, clean surface here. We're going to remove all of these little blemishes as best we can. We want to have nice, sharp corners throughout the piece and make sure that everything is as beautiful and refined as we can possibly make it. We can use our flat-bladed plastic tools, and at this stage you'll see that the clay actually scrapes off as opposed to mushing like it did before. It will scrape away, allowing you to get a nice clean edge. A trick to help make the corners extra precise is to use a ruler, placing that and holding it right along the edge, and then taking our plastic straight tool, we can scrape away, creating a perfectly straight edge there. And we'll do the same thing on the other side, holding the ruler in place. For the larger areas, you can try using a bigger straight edge, like the side of my knife. Now we've refined all those edges so that they're nice, sharp, and clean all over. To further polish this, if you have access to sandpaper, this can be a great way to smooth the surface further If possible, I would advise sanding outside to reduce the amount of dust. It's a good idea to sand this bottom edge. Now we're ready to do a final smooth out with water using a damp sponge. Our goal is to make the surface as pristine, smooth, and clean as possible. Now that we've refined and polished our house, we're ready to go ahead and add some of those windows, which really will give the votive house its life. To do this, I would highly recommend that you either cut out paper stencils that can work, or find around your house objects that will work nicely to give you shapes of different sizes. I would not advise attempting to cut any shapes and windows completely freehand. That will not look so great. Hopefully you have access to a razor blade or some other sharp knife that you can use for this. The sharper the better. And before we start cutting away, it's a good idea to plan and think about where you want to place these windows, making sure that you place those windows at the same spot. So I've given myself some marks to work from. I happen to have access to lots of Lego in my house, so I'm going to use some Lego bricks to give me the rectangles I want to make these windows. Holding that brick right on my mark, trying to make it nice and even. I'm going to trace around this Lego brick, give myself the nice outline shape for my first window. Now we're ready to actually cut out these windows. So I would highly recommend, if possible, that you try to get some lattice work into your design. It will make it look more detailed. And taking the time to really clean up those edges. You can make sure those edges are nice and clean. Using the straight edge, I can refine the corners. Then I can take a sponge. And we've got our first nice opening. You're going to want to proceed to make designs all around the house. I'm going to take this paper stencil. Trick, you can add a little water. And that stencil will stick. I've got the first side completely finished. Looks good. You can decide to make it formal. You can also experiment and make some different, more organic patterns if you wish. For this side, I'm going to pick a few spots, marking how I want the windows to go. So I'm going to put a window here. I'm going to kind of make a spiral of windows. And I'm going to use various circle designs for this one. Put a big circle right there. Be careful to avoid cutting directly where the seams overlap. You don't want to weaken the corners. That circle there. With smaller circles, you might find it easier to cut out using a needle tool. You do want to be careful about how much space you leave between openings. If you cut too many openings or the space is too small between them, you could jeopardize the structural integrity of your house. So now I've cut all of those larger holes, creating a nice organic pattern. Another technique you can use is if you have access to a drill or a Dremel. It's a great way to further add some detail. And it can This can give you a fun effect, and I'm trying to go for a nice organic pattern. I probably wouldn't mix this design with this on the same house necessarily, but you can really get creative and come up with your own ideas here. I would encourage you to use more smaller windows rather than fewer large windows, as that's going to look better. One final thing you can do to further enhance and make sure that you get nice, clean openings to these windows is to work from the inside and scrape away any of those little clay bits that might be attached, making sure that you don't have any remaining within the window openings. And that will really make these look refined and precise. You're going to want to continue adding windows to all the different sides, making this a beautiful votive house. Then be sure to sign your name somewhere on the inside.